Hello, my name is Brendan Alvey, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Missouri, and I work under Dr. Anderson in the Mindful Lab. So today we're going to be going over how to do just a really basic simulated data collection here over an agricultural field using Unreal Engine 4 and just the sort of native tools like the movie render plugin that's included. So the goal of this tutorial is really just to show you guys how to set up a really quick data collection, simulated data collection that can automatically label your data and give out some really cool ground truth. So this can be used to facilitate some computer vision projects or robotics or machine learning or really anything that you guys want to use the simulated imagery for. So the first thing you're going to want to do is install the Epic Games launcher. So you can just go to the Epic Games website, and it's going to be the same launcher that you use for like Fortnite or any of the games that are published by Epic. So if you have it installed, you can just pull it up here, and then you should have the Unreal Engine tab here. If you don't, you can, it's probably just hidden in the settings here somewhere, so you can unclick that. But then you can go into the library here if your Unreal Engine is clicked, and then there should be an engine versions sort of tab here. You can just click the plus and select whichever version you want. I'm going to be working out of 4.26.2, but you can probably use some of the other versions if you want. They have kind of updated the movie render plugin a little bit, so it might look a little different than what I'm going to show here, but you should be able to mostly follow along. So I'm just going to click launch here since I've got the engine already installed. And it's going to take just a second here to load up, and it should load because I don't have any projects in my Unreal projects folder. It's going to have this blank kind of create a project thing. I'm going to just click games and click next. I'm going to leave it on blank and click next. And then the only thing I'm going to change here is I'm going to, in the project settings, is I'm going to enable ray tracing just to get kind of those nice shadows and reflections and stuff. And then we're just going to create our project. I'm going to leave the name my project. You can change it to whatever you want. And then here it's going to load up probably just the default map here. And yep, so this is just the default kind of ray tracing map here. And you can see we don't really have any content. So the first thing we're going to want to do is get some content here for our engine. So if you go back into the launcher, there's a marketplace here, the Epic Marketplace, and there's tons of great content, all kinds of good stuff. There's lots and lots of like really good photorealistic stuff, kind of tuned, stylized stuff, anything you want. I'm going to be using this Barnyard Mega Scan or Mega Pack here that I've already got downloaded and stuff. It's a pretty cool photorealistic, pretty big map of basically like a farmland with, it's got some animations and all kinds of good stuff. So here I'm going to add it to my project, and I'm just going to click add. Okay, it'll just take a second. You can see it's already created the folder here, and it should be populating it with all the content files here. And once it's done verifying, we can open up the map, or the barnyard map here. All right, so should be done. Let's go to File, Open Level, and really any of your content should be like this. You just there'll probably be like a folder for it, and then you go in and there should be a Maps folder. This one just has this kind of big environment map. There's also an overview which has like kind of all the assets laid out. You can just play with them and see which one you want in your content pack. Okay, so we're all loaded in here, and so you can kind of see this map here. So the first thing I'm going to go is just kind of like fly around here, and you can see this is pretty high quality assets here. You can get real close and see all the different little texture on the flower, and all the pretty well modeled objects around here and everything. So I think we're going to try to do a simulated data collection of maybe a little patch of this cornfield over here. So, so the first thing you're going to want to do is probably put a camera in your scene. So let's go into where you can place your actors here, and let's just type in Cine, so like cinema, and you got Cine camera actor here, and we can just drag it into our scene. If we want to double click on it, we can kind of zoom into it. It's kind of stuck in the ground here, so we can lift it up a little bit. One thing that we might want to do, let's say we want to do a collection at, oh, I don't know, let's say 20, let's do 20 meters, okay? So, so first let me turn maybe my camera, because we're going to do it nadir and have it pointing straight down. So I'll turn my camera 90 degrees here, and I'll see, I get it down to the ground just so I can see what the value of the ground kind of is at here. Let's see, let's put our camera all the way until it's almost, okay, into the ground here. And then let's look at the Z value here. And I believe these are in sort of centimeters here. So we can, if we want to go up to 25 meter or 20 meters, we can just add a 2 to the front here. And there we go. That snapped our camera up to here. If we kind of verify this, like the height of our camera, we can go into perspective mode. So, or sorry, we're in perspective mode. We can go into different orthographic modes. So let's say we want to go maybe to the left here and look at everything from there. You can double click on our camera. So we've got it. Now this is a big scene with all kinds of stuff, so it might be a little bit congested here. But once we have it kind of loaded up here, we can see our scene. And I think those are the plants we want. So let's, if you click the middle button, you can kind of measure how far off you are. So I think our plants are actually, the ground is right around here. So I think, all right, I think these are in front, and there's actually plants behind it. That's actually the ground here. So I think it's right around here. So it should be about 20 meters there. It's a little hard to see because they're, like I said, I think these trees and stuff are kind of in front of it from this particular view, but you can do a little measuring tool there. So, okay, so let's go back into perspective mode, and then go back up here. I'm gonna kind of center my camera just over on the corner here. And what we're gonna need to do is, since we want to do automatic labeling of these crops here, we're gonna need to set basically like a value for the renderer to know which object is which and what to label them as. So what we can do is, first we need to go to edit, then we can go to project settings, and we need to enable the custom stencil buffer. So if you type in custom stencil here, you can see the custom depth stencil pass. We're going to change it from enabled to enabled with stencil, and then that's going to just enable this, allow us to set the values and have it rendered out. So so then let me click on our sort of farm, or our plants here. And so normally, if you just want to do this with sort of like a static mesh or something, let's say I just like take a cone and put it in the object, and you want to have it labeled in your scene. Now that we have the custom stencil buffer enabled, you should be able to just say custom stencil here, and you can enable a custom depth paths and set your stencil value. But for some things that have blueprints, like so these crops here were spawned with a blueprint, it might be a little bit more work than that. So I'll just show you real quick how to do it. If you go into edit your BP spawner here, this is going to show us basically the blueprint and for how everything is done here, or basically how those crops are spawned. So we can just add to the end here a little bit of we can get the HISM, get the current basically target here. We can add a little custom stencil, or uncheck this context sensitive here, and we'll say custom stencil. We have the value. Oops, that's not it. We want custom stencil. We have to set the custom stencil value, and we also want to have it enabled. So custom depth. There we go. Okay, so we want this value enabled, or the the custom render pass to be enabled for this object, and then we also want a value to be set here. So we can just set it to whatever we want. Let's just say like 201 or something. We can steal this sort of execution from the end of this little guy here, and we can hook up our target to these two here. Oops. So that. Here we go. And then we can just chain the executions if we want here, and then now that should enable us to have our sort of custom render here on the crops. So okay, so let's go back to our camera. So we've set a value for what eventually is going to be the value that these are going to be automatically labeled with. We have our camera kind of set to our initial position. So the next thing I'm going to do is start to basically create a set of key points that are going to represent my collection here. So let me get back to the corner of here, and we're going to do just a little bit of maybe a lawnmower, maybe like 4 or so points. So I'm going to go to cinematics. I'm going to say add a level sequence. I'm going to call this my simulated data, or maybe we'll call it lawnmower. And first thing I can do is I could change the number of frames if I wanted to that we're going to render out. I'm just going to keep it to the default 150 here. And I'm going to go to track, actor to sequence, and add our cinema camera here that we had before. Okay. So now that we've got our camera, we can sort of set it. So first of all, we can go into our camera settings if we want. And there's all kinds of things we can set. We can set sort of the focal length, the focal distance. We can change like the different like models for it. One thing that I recommend is to uncheck constrain aspect ratio if you want to render at say like a different resolution than like the lens kind of parameters define. You can also set some things that you might want here to do like a more controlled data collection. One thing that I always like to do is control the exposure. So you can sort of search for brightness here, and I'm going to fix these at 3 to give it, maybe I'll do 4. Or yeah, we'll go back to 3. Okay, we'll do 3. And then let's do maybe motion blur. What that just did, let me go back to where I just was. So in here, I'm setting the min and max brightness basically for the exposure to the same value. So this is going to fix the exposure of the camera. So it's just going to have a fixed kind of brightness. We can change the motion blur amount. I'm going to click this and set it to 0. So there's going to be no motion blur here. We can also look at like film grain. I think by default, yeah, it's off, but we can, kind of make sure there's none on. One that you may not want, vignetting, which is on by default. So you can sort of turn that off. It's sort of the darkening around the outer edges. So once you click that or put it to 0, it'll turn that off. So now we've got our camera just kind of set to a pretty basic kind of constant collection here, no motion blur. I'm going to set my first key point. So I'm going to click on the cinema camera actor, and then if it's in if I've got the camera where I want it, and I'm going to set my keyframe here at frame 0, I can just click S, and then you can see a keyframe was added. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move my camera. So since I'm going to do a lawnmower, I'm going to kind of move it all the way to the edge here. Oh, actually, first let me decide which keyframe or which frame I want to put this keyframe at. So I'm just going to go to frame maybe 60 here, and then move my camera back. So okay, back to the edge here, and then I'm going to click S. And you can see we've got another keyframe here, and you might be able to see this. It's drawn a little line here connecting the keyframes. Now we could change the orientation of the camera, and it would interpolate in between, just as it's kind of interpolating the position here. I'm just going to keep the orientation of the camera fixed here, and I'm going to move kind of going down my lawnmower. So next keyframe I'm going to say is maybe at frame 90 here. I'm going to move the camera a little bit up. Further down the field, click S. So we've got our third keyframe, and then I'm going to move all the way down to, maybe I'll just go all the way to 150 here, and we'll just have these 4 keyframes. I'll do one way back down here, so we'll do a little bit of a a lawnmower sweep. Okay, that looks about right. And S, so we get our last keyframe. You can kind of see the wireframe now for the collection is all set up, and we should be good to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and render everything out. So if I click the little movie icon, then you get the little render movie options here. I'm going to change from a video render to custom render passes so we can get some of that automatically labeled data I've been talking so much about. I'm going to change the resolution to 1080p. You can put it on whatever you want. You can change anything you want in here, custom frame rate. Couple things that I recommend. So for our render passes here, we probably want the final image, which is just the final kind of color image after everything has been applied. We have our custom stencil, which is going to give us labels. And then we've got our, I'm just going to show you guys scene depth, which is going to give us basically like a normalized depth or really just a scaled depth. If you want, and it's just going to be 8-bit so we can view it. If you guys want more accurate, like a floating point, you can do world depth and have it stored in HDR, and you can kind of control all those settings. And there's different visualizers for that. I think Disney or Pixar makes a visualizer for that. So, okay. I also recommend probably overriding your existing if you are planning on doing just a few different runs and changing things and stuff. Sometimes you don't want the frames to just keep stacking up there. If you go to animation here, usually it takes a frame or two for the engine to warm up and all the assets to load in. I'm gonna give it 3 maybe warm up frames. That might be more than's necessary, but just set all these things, and then okay, everything in here I think else is set the way I want it. And we're just going to hit capture movie here. I'll click save. And we should be getting our output here. Or we should have a little preview window here, actually. Okay, so we can see our camera doing its little collection here. Get to the end of the field. Then we move up and all the way down. Okay. So let's open up our capture folder here. And if you look, so the first thing we're going to see is our stencil buffer here. And it is working here. We do have sort of our, see that first frame kind of loaded in weird. If we go to our sort of our first real good frame here, frame 1, you can see our stencil buffer is correctly sort of labeling all our crops here. Here, let me put the color image next to it here. Let's go to frame 1. Okay. So if you see frame 1 here, you can see where the crops are at. We've got our sort of perfectly labeled per pixel labels. The only thing is we've got this sort of green color on them instead of maybe the 201 grayscale or something that we might want if we want to process this as just data. And then we've also got these little 201 texts on here that might make it hard to parse out. We also do have the depth here. I can show you guys. So you can see this has been kind of scaled a little bit. It looks like it's clipping a little bit. I'll show you guys sort of how to change that here in just a second if you want to have that all set just the way you want it. So the first thing we're going to do is maybe fix some of the things with the labels here. So if I go into our engine again, and I'm going to close out our render here. If we go into our content browser and we go in our view options and we make sure that we have show engine content checked, then we can click on our little folder here and go into engine content, and we can actually go into our buffer visualization materials here and edit them. So let's go into custom stencil first, and you probably won't have all this stuff here. You'll probably just have everything else. And you can see, if you really look into it, all this junk here is just computing all that text stuff. So if we want the text stuff, what we can do, or we want to take it out, we can just bypass it like this. We'll just skip it all and save, close it out, and let's do another render here. Let's just see what that did. All right. So if we open up say image 0 now. Looks like rendered okay now that we got everything labeled in. Now we don't have the text over there, but everything's still green, and it doesn't really match the value that we kind of set there. And there's also another problem here, and maybe I'll sort of demonstrate it real quick. If I put, say, a big old sphere, I don't know why you would do this necessarily, but let's just say, there's just something occluding some of your crops here. So I'm just gonna, just for demonstration purposes, I'm gonna make this maybe a big old sphere here of 3 meters big, and it's just gonna be sitting here on top of the crops, and I'm gonna do the render with it in here now. And I'm gonna show you guys sort of another issue that's sort of happening here in the custom stencil buffer and how to correct it. Okay, so we can see the sphere there. Let's open up our capture folder, and you might notice that these don't look much different. These are correct. They have been overwritten. We have sort of the ball here now, but we're still getting all of our stencils sort of through it. Now, you may want this. If you do, you can leave it as is and just sort of move on with your life. If you do want occlusion and the sort of only the valid pixels to work here and to be checked, what we can do is let's go back into our custom stencil material here. And I'm not going to go into every little detail here of what's going on, but you can kind of write your own, where you take the custom stencil here, which is sort of just that original stencil value coming out. We're going to divide it by 255, so it scales between 0 and 1. And then we're going to take that and we're going to sort of mask it or multiply it with sort of the difference between our custom depth, which is going to be the depth of only our stencil, basically the objects with stencil values, minus our scene depth. And that's going to kind of show us which one's sort of if it's valid or not. And then we're going to kind of invert that and then multiply it together. So if we put that all together here and use that as our color instead, then let's do one more capture here. And now you can see, oops, that the ball here, the sphere, is sort of occluding the targets correctly, if that's what you kind of desire here. So okay, so that's how to do a real basic collection here. As I showed, you can kind of get the depth out of here. The depth is not going to be, it's only going to be 8-bit. If you want more out of it, you can just enable the HDR part here and set sort of your desired compression or whatever you want here, the bit rate, sort of 16-bit or 32-bit, and go from there. But this should get you guys up and running with doing just sort of a basic data collection. So I did want to mention, so now that we've kind of modified this custom stencil now here, one thing that is kind of coming out of that that's nice is that now if we go into our labeled, excuse me, our stencil output here, and we pull up, let me pull up the corresponding color image here just so you guys can see it. And actually, I'm going to open up this in good old Paint, the stencil, so we can look at the value here of this grayscale. So I'm just going to take the dropper here and put it on the grayscale value of these crops here, and click on Edit Color so I can look at it, and there we go. It's the exact 201 value that we set in our sort of blueprint there earlier. So now we have automatically labeled agricultural data that you could do kind of anything you want with. And really, that's going to be most of this video. I'm just going to go real quick and show how to a little bit of the depth. I'm just going to show you that you can pop up scene depth here. Really, all scene depth is doing is it's got the sort of the depth value, and it's just scaling it by 0.001 here, so that you've got sort of like sort of things that are relatively near you are going to be within that 8-bit range. So I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover here. Thank you for watching. If you are more interested in doing some more programmable stuff where you're sort of moving the camera around with code, or yeah, something along those lines, or moving objects around and randomizing textures and all that, you can look at Drew's tutorial on AirSim. He's got some stuff on how to do more programmable stuff. Also look forward to our more of our blueprint tutorials in the future. Thanks for watching, and good luck with all of your projects.